All right, my lunch is on the way, so let's power through this. 2025 was a busy year for me, wrought with near endless game jams and half-baked ideas that I threw together without any planning or forward thinking. And now that 2025 is over, I thought it would be a good idea to look at some of those unfinished projects that I've made over this year. This year, I got heavily inspired by Lethal Company and Repo and attempted to make a few of my own looter friend slaps, starting with... Not Nailed Down is a fantasy-based looter where you play as a party of adventurers tasked with delving into a trap-filled dungeon and collecting everything that quite literally isn't nailed down to pay off your ever-growing bar tab. I didn't get very far into this one as I barely touched the basics of the concept, as this was my first ever dive into multiplayer and specific things like proximity chat. But I was able to create this procedural dungeon generator with rooms and hallways that can place traps and loot dynamically, along with a very rudimentary loot collection system. Not Nailed Down was very clearly still during a time where I was stuck in the workflow of my untitled FPS game, where I was still focusing too much on art and aesthetics, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it can cause you to procrastinate and get lost in the weeds when you don't even have a planned game loop, or even knowledge on how to execute said game loop. Otherwise, I think this was one of my favorite ideas that directly inspired my next project that unfortunately didn't get anywhere near as far as Not Nailed Down. That being said, if you guys like any of these games, then go ahead and say which game you would like to see finished, and I'll consider doing my best to finish it for 2026. Fresh off the hype of Not Nailed Down, I thought I had a much better idea in a game I was calling Black Friday. The premise of this one being almost identical to Not Nailed Down, but more closely following its original inspiration, with it being a horror game similar to Lethal Company and Repo. The main appeal of Black Friday being a PS1 style looter shooter, where you and your friends would have to gear up and dive into seemingly abandoned malls for quality deals, where you collect televisions, clothing, appliances, basically anything you can get your hands on, so you can later sell them at a profit in your pawn shop. This would allow you to buy upgrades and better weapons to handle the horrors of the different malls you delve into. Unlike before, this was the first game that I wrote a complete game design document around before even diving into development. However, when I did finally dive into development, I was only able to get a little bit into making the aesthetic core of the game before an incident happened that caused me to completely lose the files of the game. This seriously taught me the values of backing up your code using version control, something that I would do religiously after Black Friday. Now, luckily for me, I do have a few cases of test footage that I left in a few Discord servers with friends, so I still have something to show off here. But this was definitely a game I was really proud of, and it hurts to have lost it like I did. After Black Friday, I took a few months off of game development as work was taking a toll on me. My mental state wasn't in a very good spot, and my body was regularly giving out. But over time, I would occasionally toy with a specific prototype or two. My next prototype was one of those shop simulator games with the intention of turning it into a game store simulator where you get to sell tabletop games, cards, dice, all the goods from your local game store. The main feature of this project was going to be making custom designs for your dice using a pixel texture maker similar to one seen in Animal Crossing. I only got as far as making just the very basics of moving around, picking items up, and stocking shelves before my life got too much again and this project too got lost to me. I dove back into trying to make a multiplayer experience, this time inspired by a very brief fixation on Titanfall 2 and its movement. I love moving around so much that I basically completely forgot about the gunplay and just loved jumping, wall running, sliding, the works. So I made it my personal mission to recreate the movement as closely as I could. This was also the time of year where I decided I was done completely relying on Cinti assets to make my own games. While they are fantastic for quick prototypes and even a specific style of polished game, I didn't want to rely solely on this round, low poly look for all of my games. Which leads me to taking this specific course on how to make my own stylized PS1 characters. After making the same tutorial character, I just plopped her into the game, gave her some basic animations from the Cinti locomotion pack, I know it's counterintuitive to what I just said, and began working on the multiplayer features. Once that was all done, it was time to work on the reasons why I started this game. As you could probably guess from the name of the game, this is a Titanfall 2 inspired movement game of tag. Just a regular game of tag. No guns, no knives, no traps or anything out of the ordinary. Just good old tag. I think this is the prototype that we spent the most time just running around and playing for no reason. It was really easy to get lost in this small prototype map that I made, but like all the prototypes I made this year, this one too was forgotten. All of this leads me to the final prototype worth talking about. Some of you may know, but I lost my job in 2025 after many months of it eating away at my body to the point where I couldn't stand well anymore, and the mental toll it took. I just couldn't do it, and that seriously affected my work performance to the point where they just figured it was best to let me go. What was supposed to be the start of me recovering actually was the beginning of a really bad game jam addiction where I stopped sleeping, eating, and taking care of myself because it was easier to work than realize that I was stuck at home. One of those game jams missed the deadline, but I continued working on it because I simply just loved the idea of the game. Introducing Time Crunch, a first-person survivor-like where all you have is your sword and a collection of time-based abilities to fend off hordes of enemies. For most of my game dev career, I've worked in 2D as I found 3D very difficult. In a 2D game, it's actually quite easy to work on juice and game polish, but it wasn't something I ever focused on in a 3D game. Time Crunch was my chance to change that. Using the same movement from Tagged, I've focused on making every individual aspect of the game feel as good as possible, from moving all the way to attacking and selecting upgrades. Every aspect of the game had a focus of game feel built into it, and it started to feel good, like really good. People who would playtest the game would actually refuse to give it back to me until they were done, but done would never come. But like every other prototype of 2025, I lost the ability to keep working. So what happened? What went wrong? This is a difficult question to answer, but I think I know, at least a little bit, about what caused me to stop working on these games. When you get into game development, or at least as an indie, there's no shortage of videos on how to get started, what to do, the best tips and tricks of the trade, and often one thing you hear is how motivation isn't how you complete projects, it's discipline. Discipline is something that I thought I've had in droves, but it turns out I was missing the forest for the trees. I've been working my whole life, literally my whole life. When I wasn't in school or doing homework, I was doing a part-time job. When I finished school, I immediately dropped into working full-time to try and support myself. I've always struggled with the idea of taking a break. I wasn't topped up with discipline. I was confusing motivation for pressure to finish something. That pressure kept me moving forward, but it was eating away at me. The burnout was so bad that I couldn't even recognize it anymore. I thought that it was my default state. And so when push came to shove, the moment I slowed down on work on any of my projects, I would get lost in what to do next. I figured it was a lost cause and jumped to the next project. While I never stopped working as a whole, I just couldn't stick on one project long enough to do the boring work, the things that are required to finish anything. Added on top was all the work I was forcing myself to do, be it at my actual job or all the game jams when I stopped working. I didn't know how to address my burnout, nor did I know how to cope with not working whatsoever. It led to a vicious cycle of what can only be called self-harm. Eventually, I stopped working in games altogether in the months of November and December, as it was best for my recovery. Although it has left me without any desire to work on absolutely anything, which is something that I'm still trying to work through, which is why I'm making this video. You're welcome. All in all, I am proud of what I've worked on this year. Learned plenty of new things, tried tons of different styles and genres of games, and even made what I considered to be really promising ideas. So you all let me know if you want me to continue any of these, or if I should leave them in the landfill that is my hard drive. That's all for today. Thank you so much, and thanks again to Rockman Solid for editing this video. Go check them out in the description below. And while you're there, make sure to sub so I know that I'm doing a good job. All right, bye-bye now. Thank you. Bye. Go away now. Bye. Make sure to sub. Okay, bye.